This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is March 19th, 2025. I'm going to explain some very esoteric aspects of Shabbataian Kabbalah that are going to help you to understand why Jews act the way that they do, why they feel they have the right to control your lives and control every aspect of reality. They think they not only have the right, but they have the duty to do this, and that Gentiles only exist as an imposition on their divine right to control the universe completely. In order to grasp these concepts, you first have to understand something called an egregor. An egregor is an occult principle. It's a being that comes into existence through a group or a collective thought consciousness that generates through its imagination this supernatural being. So if a bunch of kids watch a Casper cartoon, Casper the friendly ghost becomes a real entity, because the only real entities from the perspective of the Kabbalist are those entities which exist in the human mind and are imagined by the human mind. So the gods of the Jews come into existence through the thoughts of the Jews. The Jews imagine them into being. And the primary gods of the Jews are Satan, who has a male aspect, Samael, and a female aspect, Lilith, and the Tetragrammaton, Yod-He, Vav-He, Yahweh. And Yod-He is the male aspect of the Tetragrammaton, and Vav-He is the female aspect of the Tetragrammaton. Now these gods only exist so long as the Jews imagine them to exist, as above, so below. And below, as the Jews imagine these gods, they create them in the heavens. Above, the primary dwelling of Satan in Kabbalah is above, in the heavens. He is one of the angelic beings. Now, a practical manifestation of this egregor concept is found in Christianity. Since Satan doesn't actually exist, the Jews had to imagine Satan into being and create a group that would play the role of Satan. So the egregor of Satan became Christianity. The Jews invented Christianity to play Satan's roles as the tempter, the tester, the accuser, the prosecutor, and the punisher. And another of Satan's roles is to serve as a scapegoat for the sins of the Jews against the laws of the other gods of the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, Yod-He, Vav-He. So the Christians serve all these satanic roles. They tempt Jews to become Christians, and they test Jews in that way, which is a very useful function as far as the Jews are concerned, because it weeds out the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. And the Jews have this concept of sweetening the dinim, sweetening the punishments that should be meted out to them for breaking the laws of Yahweh. And the way that they primarily sweeten those dinim are to obey the mitzvot, the 613 commandments, as laid down by Maimonides, but also, and more importantly, since they are constantly breaking those commandments, to pass off their sins onto the scapegoat of Satan, who is Jesus Christ, and who is collectively the Christians. And the Christians also form the egregor of Satan by believing in Jesus Christ and worshiping Jesus Christ. So Judaism is a religion of egregores. It's gods that are created through the imagination of the Jews and through the imagination of the peoples who abandon their ancestral gods and in their place worship the gods that the Jews have created for the Gentiles in the place of their ancestral gods, in order to subvert the Gentiles and convert the Gentiles into satanic beings who play Satan's roles, and especially Satan's role as a scapegoat, to absorb and be punished for the sins of the Jews in the Jews' place. Now the Shabbataians take all this to its ultimate conclusions. And in the book of Ezra and other parts of the Old Testament, it talks about the idea that the Jews are the holy seed. And in the modern conception, seed is made up of chromosomes, of DNA. And the human body itself mirrors those chromosomes, which generate the human body in many ways. The centronome is like the torso, and the short arms are like our arms. And if you put our arms up and spread out our legs, it forms an X, which looks very much like our chromosomes. So they believe that they are the holy seed. Their brains generate the gods. Their brains generate the egregor of Satan and Yahweh, and Satan and Yahweh cease to exist if the Jews cease to imagine them. And the Jews, through their imagination, define the gods and provide the gods with their thoughts and with their map of creation. The Jews created the Torah, and the Jews created Kabbalah, which is the old written map of the Torah, and then the oral law of the Torah of Kabbalah. So God's thoughts are actually the thoughts of the Jews. And creation is, according to them, the product of their own thoughts. And their thoughts and their will manifest creation as well as creating the gods. So the God's thoughts are the Jews' thoughts, and the God's DNA are the holy seed of the Jews. So the Jews view themselves as the chromosomes of God. And these chromosomes generate the brains of the Jews, the consciousness of the Jews, the imagination of the Jews, and the thoughts of the Jews, which are therefore the thoughts and the imagination and the creations of the gods of the Jews, of Yahweh, which include the universe at large. So this is where their fundamental arrogance comes from, and the belief that we are simply animals who have no ability to do any of this other than to create the egregor of Satan and to serve Satan's roles, especially as Christians worshiping the satanic figure of Jesus Christ. All of this becomes tremendously relevant to world events today, and especially in the era of high technology, where we have gone way past the printing press to produce movies and social media, and now artificial intelligence. The Jews believe, like the ancient Egyptians, that the universe is created through words and letters and thoughts. So when the Jews create their movies, which are seen by many as predictive programming or sympathetic magic, what they're doing is creating the thoughts of God and creating the thoughts of the universe and putting those out so that people form this egregor, this common consciousness, which generates this universe that the Jews control because they write the scripts. And this is very dangerous for us. And you'll see, if you pay attention, that most of the scripts that they have been writing for the past 50 years or more, 70 years, are apocalyptic, end-of-the-world scripts. They are deliberately trying to put the thoughts into God's head that the universe is about to be destroyed and that the Gentiles are about to cease to exist. It's obvious how dangerous this is for us. And it's going to be necessary for us to seize control of these narratives. The Jews are very good at creating controlled opposition who put into people's heads ideas which they think are actually helping them to fight back against all this, but which ultimately fulfill this agenda. And Christianity is the perfect ancient example of that. They created the religion for the Gentiles, which ultimately leads the Gentiles to embrace their own demise and their own complete and absolute destruction. So to summarize again, the basic principles of Shabbataian Kabbalah are that the Jews themselves are the DNA, the holy seed of God. They are the mind of God. They are the consciousness of God. And just as the DNA of their being creates their bodies, creates their brain, creates their minds and their consciousness, that then further generates through this egregor principle their gods and creates the entire universe. And this has very powerful practical implications because the Jews have so much representation in politics, in media, in journalism, online. They own the social media companies. They censor things which go against their narrative, and they boost things which promote their narrative. So this actually becomes reality because it is the common will of human beings that does affect the future very strongly. And if we continue to follow these narratives which are being artificially planted into our consciousness, they are actually going to succeed in manifesting their script as reality. And it is very difficult for the masses to grasp these concepts. And I'm doing my best to try to simplify things. But this does have its roots in the Old Testament, in the idea that the Jews are the holy seed. And the Eastern European Kabbalah said that the universe only exists for the sake of the Jews, and if the Jews cease to follow the Torah, the written script, the universe itself will be destroyed and be consumed. So they have a strong cultural mandate to perpetuate this horror against us and to perpetrate their crimes against us because that's what they're commanded to do. And they think that ultimately that will pass off all of their sins onto us and they will be redeemed. Now they believe that they are trapped and stranded in this world of chaos together with the Gentiles, that they have been exiled from paradise, from the Garden of Eden, and that the only way that they can return to that garden is through the process of Tikkun Olam, rectifying the world, to turn this natural world into their artificial world of chaos that they have generated as a script. And that script is Kabbalah that defines how this world to come is supposed to be. And the primary aspect of creating the world to come is eliminating the Gentiles from existence. So they have put this thought into the heads of their gods. And you can see that immediately in Christianity, in Matthew chapter 24 and in Revelation, where it talks about the complete destruction of the world and destruction of humanity. That's the script. That's the egregor. So they have made that the will of the Christian God, Jesus Christ, as well as the will of Yahweh and Satan, Samael Lilith, and in alternative forms in Islam as well. So we need to follow a new script and to enlighten people to the fact that these are human creations and not supernatural creations, and that the Jews at the highest Kabbalistic levels not only understand that, but insist upon that. And here's a good example of how Kabbalah operates in terms of those two worlds. This present world of chaos that they wish to escape, and the world to come that they wish to create. You can see from this fallen tree that the upper part of the tree has branches which resemble the roots of the tree. And this tree has been upended. And if we flip this tree over completely, you could make the head, the crown of the tree, into the roots, and you could make the roots into the branches. And again, the Jews believe that they are trapped in this world together with the Gentiles. They're stranded like people marooned on an island, and that their primary quest to flip that tree over, to shift the world from the world of the Sephirot to the world of the Kelepotic tree, the tree of knowledge, they have to steal the souls of the Gentiles, and they have to steal the intelligence and consciousness and knowledge that the Gentiles produce. And they have to steal the gods, the egregores, that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Egyptians and the Chaldeans and the Babylonians produced. And then they have to leave us naked in the wilderness and without food and without the supernatural protection of those egregores that our ancestors had created. The ancient ancestral gods of the Gentiles loved their own people and wanted to perpetuate their own people. And though there were often apocalyptic myths among those as well, they were often seen as what brought victory and survival and longevity to the nation that worshipped its national gods. Christianity, Islam, and Marxism set about to destroy all that and replace all that with egregores of Satan. And they trick Gentiles into believing those egregores. And those egregores are defined by scripts written by Jews, including the Old and New Testaments, including the Quran and the Hadiths, many of them, and including Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto and other works by Marx, often in collaboration with Engels. So they believe that through creating these egregores based upon these scripts, they've got us locked in, and our future will follow the path that they have set for us of our own suicidal destruction, which these scripts that Jews have written call for. So it was a setup from the beginning. Now the Shabbataians believed that they could break free from the script of the Old Testament and instead rely purely on Kabbalah. And they have set about doing that by defining sin as the means to redemption and doing the exact opposite of all of Yahweh's laws. So they are completely devoid of any form of morality. And the script that the Shabbataians have written is for the mass destruction of humanity, including mass destruction of many Jews. These Shabbataians remain tremendously powerful, but these are also the fundamental doctrines of Judaism from the very beginning. They were passed along as the oral tradition, and as best they could, the Jews tried to keep them hidden from the Gentiles, while at the same time duping the Gentiles into believing that the written Torah of the Old Testament is the Word of God, so that the Gentiles themselves embrace and manifest and create this God, Yahweh, and Satan in the form of Jesus Christ, while at the same time abandoning all of their ancestral gods who had protected them, and the scripts of their ancestral gods, which made them national heroes and which glorified their people. The script of the Old Testament glorifies the Israelites. The script of the New Testament calls for Gentiles to worship Satan. Satan, who hates Gentiles, calls Gentiles dogs, and said that he came only for the lost sheep of Israel, and instructs Gentiles to bear their cross, meaning that they are to serve Satan's role as scapegoats and provide the dinim, the sweetening of the dinim, the sweetening of the punishment for the Jews, so that they take on the burden of all the sins of the Jews, and in that way provide redemption to the Jews. So be very, very mindful of the narratives that are being put out by the Jews as they create these savior figures like Trump and Putin and associate them with the gods. What they are attempting to do, and in a very practical sense are doing, is writing the map of creation, drawing it out, scripting the future. And the future is meant to exterminate us. Part of that process has been the misconception that they create among Gentiles, that we are born and conceived in sin and are therefore inherently evil beings, so that our destruction becomes the salvation of the earth. We've got to get out of that mindset. Another part of this that gives the Jews tremendous advantage is that they believe that their minds create the gods. The gods are the product of their minds. Their minds, their brains, are the brain cells of the gods. And all of these derive, according to them, from the Jewish DNA, the divine DNA. That puts Christians and Muslims and Marxists at a tremendous disadvantage, especially Christians, because they believe that their souls are given by God and put into the material vessel of their bodies, and that the bodies are inherently evil, and that they must pass through death in order to obtain immortality and return to the gods which had bestowed these souls upon them and created them. It is vastly superior to believe that you are the creator of the gods than to believe that the gods are the creator of you, because that takes away from you your ability to change reality and reshape your environment into whatever form best suits your survival. Instead, Christians have been taught to pursue the fulfillment of the script, the narrative that was given to them by the Jews, which calls for their ultimate and complete destruction. They also believe that their bodies, their flesh, is evil. It is a corpse of flesh that they feel they must escape. The reality is that the soul is a manifestation of our DNA. Our belief in the gods is created by human beings. The gods are products of the human imagination. We should be imagining gods who glorify us, who glorify our existence, and who are grateful to us for creating our understanding of what they are. And we should be writing narratives of the future which perpetuate our life and our DNA and our descendants and honor our ancestors instead of the ancestors of the Jews, Jesus, David, Solomon, and Moses, all of whom reviled and despised and wished for the extinction of the Gentile peoples. So I suggest, if you really want to understand what's going on and why Hollywood and fantasy and science fiction writers have been continually promoting the narrative at least ever since the Torah itself was scripted, that the Gentiles are doomed to ultimate destruction. And why it is we see that the world is being set up not only by the Jews, but by all the people whom the Jews have duped into pursuing these destructive, genocidal egregor gods, and the narrative that the Jews have scripted. Why all that is taking place. And it is not being done by the will of the gods, which don't exist. It is being done by people who have been taught to believe that this is the will of the gods. We can escape all of these narratives and all of these egregores. The problem is, it's going to be very difficult to break through to the masses of people and to reach them with the truth and the knowledge of how all this has come to be. It will be even more difficult to get them to align with some kind of belief system that teaches them that the gods are actually humans create gods. Gods don't create humans. Humans are the chromosomes of the gods. Our DNA creates our consciousness, which defines the parameters of our being and our understandings of sensual experience. And it is our will, not the will of the gods, which will determine our future in our society and our survival if we only have faith in ourselves. That has been a tremendous advantage for Jewry, is that they have faith in themselves and in the sages of their ancestors who created all of this deception, all of this mythology, this narrative that they have, the holy seed, the holy DNA, the DNA of God, the consciousness of God, the intellect of God. And this has always been the process of the mystery religions, of the secret societies of the ancient world, in which they always encourage their devotees to turn inwards and to view themselves as microcosms of the macrocosm of the gods. But the Jews take that a significant step further and assert that their gods, Yahweh and Satan, and their male and female aspects, Shekinah, Lilith, Samael, Yah, that these are actually beings which only exist for the sake of the Jews and are creations of the minds of Jews, and that the minds, the collective minds of the Jews, the 600,000 souls of the Jews, create not only these egregor gods, but the universe itself, and sustain the universe itself by reading the Torah. The Torah is the script, the narrative that creates out of its words and out of its letters the being of the egregor gods. That is why they are commanded to study the Torah, and that is why they are taught that if no Jew in the world were to study the Torah even for a moment, the entire universe would cease to exist. And those beliefs are all based on this concept that the Jews themselves are the DNA, the mind, and the body of God. So where does that leave the Gentiles in this system? The Gentiles then become the slaves, the servants of this narrative, of this agenda, and of this supposedly divine people. And they play the role of the egregor of Satan to test, tempt, accuse, prosecute, and punish Jews, but to themselves become the scapegoats of the Jews, and to sweeten the dinim of the punishment of the Jews for the Jews, so that the Jews will ultimately obtain redemption through the complete extermination of the Gentiles. Carefully consider the fact that the egregor gods created by the Christian gospel narrative is a corpse hanging from a tree, a cursed corpse, a defeated corpse, a corpse that believes it lives through death, and that death is life. That narrative sets up all Christians to serve that same role of Jesus, to each bear their own cross, and through their martyrdom to bear as the scapegoat for the Jews all the sins and all the punishment, the dinim of the Jews, to sweeten it for the Jews. I think it would help a great deal if Christians became aware of all this and were to help in the struggle to end it. it's important to keep in mind that if we can get on the other side of this and take control of our own fate, create our own gods, seize control over our own destiny, nature provides everything that we need to survive and to have wonderful, happy lives in future generations. We can look upon this as a dark winter that we've passed through to a beautiful spring. We need people to step up. We need our best people to step up. It has historically always been great leaders who have changed the fate and destiny of mankind. It's very important to keep in mind the beautiful world that lies on the other side of all this. If we can overcome these obstacles and gain control of our own fate. The natural world is such a better place than the artificial world that these demons are manufacturing for humanity to convert us into their slaves, into soulless beings whom they control completely and viciously. The natural world is waiting for us if we simply return to it. We have to start writing our own narratives and scripting our own destiny. It's always been the job of great men and women, and they've tried to destroy all of those among us. The Old Testament says that the wise men of Edom have to be exterminated. I think one of the biggest problems we face is that our best people are filled with self-doubts. They work all kinds of psychological operations to defame and silence people who speak the truth like me. And a lot of people can't face it and stand up to it. But if you don't, we're getting very near the end. So we need a lot of people to start stepping up and reshaping our future. And there's so much that we can accomplish if people are willing to do that.